Welcome to our November session here at Do the Work. It is November 20th for those who are watching after the fact. My name is Arya Davachi. I am the programming director here at Do the Work. If this is your first time with us, I'll give you the fast and loose of what Do the Work is. We're an organization across the country aimed at creating meaningful and sustainable change for queer people in marketing and advertising and all of its adjacent fields of work, which really is kind of an endless spiral if you think about it. So really out here trying to create as much representation both inside of the work and also backstage in the agencies in Adland. And we are here today, a little over 2 weeks post-election, discussing the realities of healthcare marketing for LGBTQ people. And for those who are unaware, I am a gay person who is a very big advocate of clean rights and queer rights in general. And this has been a very difficult few weeks. We are here today to talk about this topic, and this topic, to be totally transparent, was chosen months ago. This topic was something that we had considered to be incredibly necessary to discuss as an organization, and to be having this conversation now in the wake of a new administration that has said a lot of pretty negative things around the queer community coming in to power in just a few months. This conversation takes on a whole new meaning and a whole new tone. And I want to encourage everyone who's with us, who's watching this, to understand that we are still in the wake of that decision, and we are responding from a place of still being in the ebbs and flows of waves of knowing what the future of this country looks like. And so this conversation is one that we find to be incredibly important, because not only does it play into our lived experience as queer people, but healthcare marketing is one of the key pillars of what advertising and marketing does these days. And we've seen a huge push in the last decade in holding companies and beyond around creating healthcare departments, agencies, verticals, all these things that have become very, very well known in Adland. And so this conversation is going to be incredible because of the folks that we have managed to convince to come and talk to us in this trying time. And so I will introduce myself a little more fully, and then I'll introduce them. As I mentioned, my name is Arya Davachi. I am coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. I am the programming director of Do the Work, been in this role for almost 4 years now. I host and program all of our conversations with an amazing team of folks that do the work who truly make this happen. And my day job is I am a producer and curator, currently working on a project for a huge tech company, creating ways for all different types of creators across the country and across the globe to create new revenue streams. I'm going to pass it over to Jenn. Jenn, welcome to Do the Work. Can you tell the folks where you are, who you are, what you do, how you identify, please?
No, I appreciate that. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenn Renoe. She, her pronouns. I'm based in Brooklyn. By day, I am director of branded content within a major healthcare agency, healthcare marketing agency. By gay job, I become somewhat of a national advocate for LGBT people. I've been considered one of the top future leaders of the LGBT community from a business perspective for several years, according to a company named Involve. I was privileged enough to be named to the Out 100 last year, and I'm the first out trans woman ever named one of Ad Age's leading women. So I have kind of an interesting background and diverse perspective in my own way, and especially with everything going on right now. So excited to be here, brought my tissues and all.
Jenn, we are so happy you're with us. Can't wait to have this conversation. Ashley, I'm going to toss to you. Can you introduce yourself to folks, please? You may be muted.
I'm talking to myself. I said, my name is Ashley Rogers. I am, my pronouns are she, her. I am based here in Houston, Texas. I am a health equity strategist. I come from a public health background, so I've done a lot of work both internationally and domestically across all healthcare fields. I am currently working as a consultant for major PR agencies, working across pharma and also nonprofit sectors.
Amazing. So happy you're here. Of course. Desiree, going to come to you last but not least. Tell the folks a bit about yourself, please.
Hi, Desirée Duncan, she, her pronouns. I'm currently based in Austin, a bit of a nomad traveling around the country, but from Nashville. And I lead the health equity and inclusion work with a healthcare and marketing comms firm. And yeah, I guess outside of work, as far as my gay job, my queer job is, I've served on a number of boards across the country, within Tennessee as well as Nevada, and just making sure that we're just kind of keeping on for, I don't know, 15 years now.
Very happy to have amassed such an incredible group of folks to have this conversation. I want to start by addressing the moment. This has been an interesting few weeks, difficult few weeks, horrible few weeks. I will let you choose your own adjectives. Desirée, I'm going to stick with you. Can you tell me about what the last few weeks have been like for you and how you're feeling right now?
Yeah, went to bed hopeful and really excited about the potential for a president that looks like me. And of course, woke up to reality of like, all right. And so, yes, the first couple of days, just, hands in the air, like, what are we going to do? But, again, I am always thinking about like, what is this story telling us? And that essentially the pendulum is swinging yet again. We saw something like this where there's this huge cultural backlash to Black and brown queer folks living out their joy. We saw that with the disco demolition in the 70s. We saw that with a version of that kind of male energy kind of taking over with Woodstock 99. I don't know if you all saw that documentary. And then we are, of course, seeing that with the bro vote of the election of 2024. So essentially, I'm thinking about how, we as a community, perhaps maybe even going back underground, keeping the fight going, but like really resting and finding that safe place in us and really rebuilding, because we've seen this before. So from that disco demolition, we saw the rise of EDM, house music, techno music, the ballroom scene, voguing to RuPaul's Drag Race. So we can see the trajectory and what this is a testament to our resilience and creativity as a community, as a people, that we will come back guns and blazing.
Thank you for sharing. Ashley, I'm going to come to you next. Tell us.
Yeah, I was again, like Desiree, hopeful when I went to bed, and then woke up to reality. Quite sad for a few days. Probably took in an obscene amount of TikTok during that weekend, like just depressed, just taking it all in. But then I realized I would not let this administration steal my joy. And the joy of those who I'm constantly fighting for. And, as an ally for the community, I think it's really important for us to continue to fight. We'll take these few months to rest because we're going to be fighting for our lives in multiple ways. As a consultant and working in like health equity and also some DEI work, I'm very familiar with Project 2025, and I know what's to come. And so I think as we use this time wisely, we start building community, but also like strategies, and knowing that we're working in the marketing space, we need to be able to start getting our allies that are working with us to make sure they're fighting the good fight too and not being silenced, because this is going to be really hard, but a good kind of hard. Like we have to, we can't let them win. But as a Black woman in America, coming from parents that were part of the Jim Crow South, I know that there's always light at the end. We just kind of have to keep going. So that's where I am.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate the honesty. Jenn, I'm going to come to you. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
Still trying to bounce back. I wish I could say that I'm surprised. I've actually been preparing for this for a while. I've actually been hoarding meds. So I'm covered so I can keep fighting in the US for as long as possible. People may not realize this, but my doctor's worried about me developing osteoporosis if I have to get rid of my HRT, because as a 40-year-old woman, menopause is something that I will deal with if I go off my hormones. So trying to prepare for all of that on top of trying to give myself space to grieve before I'm ready to start doubling back down into doing the work. There's a lot of work. It's going to be more important than ever. It's not just about public speaking. It's not just about using your pen. It's about creating communities where we can all gather and be together and feel safe and loved. You know, we look at what happened 2 days ago in Minneapolis, which is a state that should be a safe haven because of all the work Tim Walz did to protect trans people in it. There were 2 trans women who were assaulted, and people cheered. Like, that's the reality of the world we live in right now. People are feeling emboldened and empowered to do these things. It's not safe for us anywhere. Yes, there are places that are theoretically safer, but safety is not something that any of us in this community have access to right now. So the net is, I'm struggling. I think that's the easiest TLDR I can give.
Thank you for sharing, and I share the sentiment. I want to talk first and foremost about the most prominent, at least in my opinion, LGBTQ healthcare marketing that's in the world right now, which is around PrEP. For those who don't know, PrEP is a oral drug that can be taken to prevent contracting HIV. There are versions where you can be receiving doses through injection as well. This is a drug that I'm personally on, a drug that I know a lot of folks learn about through commercials, particularly people that are outside of the community. This is the premier way that we are talking to queer people in marketing as it relates to their healthcare right now. And I would love to talk with you all about how this marketing is working or not working for the community. Ashley, I want to come to you first. What are your thoughts on the marketing that goes around PrEP, and what are your thoughts in terms of how it's serving the community?
That's a really good question. I have actually been working in HIV for over a decade, working both like for nonprofits, but also for like CDC. And so I'm very familiar with the HIV community. I think they're doing a better job than they once had, because we have to really acknowledge that for a long time when it was being marketed to, it was really to gay white men, and they weren't really reaching those communities of color. And now they are, but I still think there's still issues with barriers and access and trust, right? There are still conversations of, some of these medications impact people's kidneys, and there's other issues with certain communities that have higher issues with kidney disease and like diabetes that could kill the kidneys or whatever else. So because of that, I think there could be a better way in terms of like making it more equitable and reaching communities, those that are underserved, specifically communities of color. I know PrEP also, they're now starting to market towards Black women because the HIV cases are quite high. So I think there are parts that they're doing a good job. I still think there's more that can be done, especially when we're talking about those who do not live in predominantly metropolitan areas. Like if you're in a rural space, like how are they being marketed to, where they feel safe, where they can access that information? I think we can do a little bit of a better job in that space.
Can I follow up with,
Yeah.
what do you think created that change and that shift from predominantly marketing to gay white men to a larger audience? And do you feel like that is authentic shifting that's happening there?
So the numbers have always been there, right? So you have like the Phil Wilsons of the world who started the Black AIDS Institute, who's been fighting since like the 80s and explaining the stories of what's happening in the Black community. But again, as we all know, when you're talking about pharma companies or you're talking about marketing agencies, usually the further up you go, those who are making those decisions, those who are quote unquote targeting certain communities, they're not really diverse. So I think now there's a little bit more of a push to make sure they are marketing them, because I think people are realizing, as I told you before, DEI and health equity, they're not black and white, it's green. And so you're missing a huge community that you could be reaching. And if you're talking about like making money, like you're not reaching these groups, and you need to do a better job of doing so. So I think now that's kind of the shift where they're like, oh, there's money on the table, we're missing that. I would love to say that these companies are always just doing it because it's the right thing to do. But unfortunately, there's always this conversation of the bottom line. And if we're able to make sure that we can have more folks who have access to the medication by either making it more affordable or working better with nonprofits so they actually have other types of like programs, I think that would expand it. I hope that answered your question. But yeah, I think that, okay.
It did. Desirée, Jenn, what are your thoughts? Jump right in. How do you feel like this is going in terms of PrEP marketing?
I think that one of the things we don't talk often enough as marketers is the role that we play in directing societal norms, right? Like we talk a lot about visibility that's happening within queer and trans people in TV. We talk a lot about it in movies, but we can opt in to what movies or TV we watch. We can't always opt in to what commercials we see. So you can be very anti-LGBT and choose not to watch those shows. But something like PrEP, which is so largely advertised, has the ability to normalize same-sex relationships, to normalize transness, to do these things and force people to see it and be exposed to it in general society. It's something that I talk about a lot, like using authentic language that people are speaking. Like, why aren't we using AVE? Why aren't we using, versions of Spanglish and how people are talking to talk and sort of normalize these kinds of behaviors? And I think what makes PrEP so interesting and exciting is the opportunity for us to actually showcase ourselves to communities that may not often be exposed to us. It's one of those things that I think makes what we all do so important. And I wish we all put a lot more thought and emphasis into making sure we're creating visibility in positive manners.
Yeah, along those lines, I think about this like I'm not as involved in pharma, more in the health system and service line marketing. And what I think about there is that opportunity, kind of what Jen was mentioning about the normalization. And so I would love for more, LGBTQ plus folks to show up in more, advertising around like heart health, lung health, what have you. And then also in connection to, you mentioned, Ashley, diabetes, like in relation to, how some of these things affect. I think there is a mix of like anytime that most, hetero communities, cis communities, when they see of us, it always has to do with our sexuality, and that there is something else more about us, about our health beyond our sexuality.
I think
I
that's
was just
very
going
well
to say
said.
real quick,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, like, PrEP is so important, but the one thing that I do worry about is the fact that it's the only place where we see queer relationships, and the fact that so much of the country already thinks that all we are about is our over-sexualization, that it's also doing harm in other ways. So we're normalizing same-sex relationships, but at the same time, we're furthering stereotypes that other people already have about us. So it's on other brands, it's on other things to showcase us in real life, whether that be in healthcare outside of it. But I think it's a two-pronged thing. I think it can be good in one way, but harmful in others.
The other very big marketing campaign that's been going on, it's over now, but was going on for the past 6 months, was the Trump campaign. And particularly in the last 2 months of the Trump campaign, they ran an ad that more or less ended with Kamala Harris is for they, them, Trump is for you. And I'm an avid sports watcher. I love football. I love basketball. I watch sports all the time. Every commercial break, everywhere, every day, this commercial was airing. And there is no, I don't think, overstating of the weaponization of the trans community as it pertains to the campaign that was run. And I can't deny that there will be an impact in the way that marketers tell trans stories in the coming years, maybe decades, as a response to this campaign. And I would love to hear from you all about what you think that impact is in terms of marketing specifically, and how you would, not so much how you would hope, because we'll talk about our hopes and prayers, but I think more so what you anticipate happening in terms of telling trans stories in marketing coming out of this. Ashley, I'm going to come to you first.
I can say that I'm going from because I think we're talking about, first, there's DEI, right? Like all the aspects of that. That has already started to be silenced. There was already a movement towards that. I can say that working with various clients across the spectrum of Fortune 500 companies, they're starting to not put DEI anything in their reports. They're slowly starting to close those departments as we're seeing that. And this also impacts those who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I think that just reading to Project 2025, there are going to be repercussions. Like right now, companies they're trying to propose that gender and sexual orientation are not grounds. Those can be grounds of discrimination for someone to be fired. So I think that those who are possibly even internally working for companies may not be as out and proud in fear of their own safety at companies. I think that there's going to be a lot of companies who aren't going to be on the crosshairs of what's happening. Like, for example, with Bud Light, when they had, was it Dylan? Was that her name? Dylan was on there, and then all of a sudden their stock prices dropped. There was a huge movement. I think a lot of companies took note of that. And so I'm afraid that now that Trump and friends are in office and they have a lot more power, more companies may continue to be silent and silenced in fear of repercussions for their bottom line or for their safety or what have you, which is very upsetting because we have to continue to speak up. But we just may have to like rename and reframe as we're like fighting the good fight. We may just have to get extra scrappy and extra creative, but we have to continue to speak up. So.
Yeah, Desirée, I wonder your thoughts too around how this impacts your work. And again, obviously we're talking specifically about the trans community here, but as Ashley mentioned, this is much bigger than just that also in the DEI perspective. So I would love to hear from you about how you feel like this is going to affect your work.
Yeah, there's a lot of thinking and talking about the renaming, reframing, and what terminology, what verbiage, what narrative we can use to kind of fly a little bit more under the radar, where language often gets co-opted, right? And so I'm also thinking about, from that marketing, from that hospital, that health system standpoint, is there are legal repercussions for the care delivery. And so they're thinking about that and like, how do you talk about something that is, going to become or is already, against the law in your state? And so I think it'll go the route of, what we've seen as far as with reproductive rights and abortions. Like you don't really usually see advertising for that. It's more of a you go to these direct places to find that information. So I could see a world where, in marketing, we have all of these great personalization tools, strong targeting tools, where we can get that information out directly to the folks that need that info, rather than blasting to a large, wider audience, where that can bring a bit of danger for the folks that really need that care.
Jenn?
I think the fact you think there's going to be any marketing to trans people over the next 4 years is one of the most optimistic takes I've heard in the last few weeks. We started seeing it last June, and Ashley, you definitely brought it up. You brought up Dylan Mulvaney, and the one thing that I do want to call out to any business who's watching this is when that happened, I haven't had Bud Light since I was in college. My lesbian friends and I got together when we were slamming pitchers like water. Like the reason why stock dropped wasn't because they supported Dylan Mulvaney. It's because they backed off and refused to take a stand on either side. And that's what caused the problem. That's what caused stocks to drop. That's what caused sales to go down. And I think that is unfortunately irrelevant to sort of this topic, which is what our story is going to look like. And in my experience, typically when stories are being crafted, they're told through the lens of trans trauma. And as we do that, and as we tell stories of trans trauma, that continues to reinforce this idea that we shouldn't exist. We need to be talking about trans joy. And I think when we're allowing trans people to have control of some of the narrative and at least offer perspective and what this looks like to them, it changes minds, it changes perspectives. I've been very privileged to be able to speak at conferences and to companies around the US and even some places around the world, and having people come up to me and say, wow, I've never known that, I've never heard that, I can't believe that. And there's so many negative misconceptions that have been blown out of proportion through the commercials that you're talking about. And I'm going to be honest, that the two people who benefited most from those commercials were my bartenders and my therapists, right? Because, if I was watching football on Sunday, every time one of those commercials came on, I was like, I need a shot. And that sounds terrible. Maybe that says more about my lifestyle than anything else, but like, it's really hard to deal and manage in a society in which everyone is actively against you. And that's what it's felt like over the last many, many months, and I'm remarkably privileged as a trans woman, right? Like I have cisgender passing privilege. I have so many people who have no idea, like not just people that I pass on the street, people I dated haven't known. And that's crazy. Doctors haven't known. And that's crazy. And I think that knowing that I'm still facing these fears and anxieties as somebody with that kind of privilege tells you exactly how bad it is, especially for trans youth, especially for people who are just starting their journey, especially people who haven't had the privilege of access to any type of transgender healthcare. And I apologize, I feel like I'm soapboxing and I don't mean to, but I think net, I think my fear is everything that we're feeling is only going to get worse because any story that is told is going to further support this negative narrative that's happening.
You know, you're absolutely right, Jen. This is essentially life or death. And I know we're talking about marketing and the like, but at the end of the day, all of this is, and I know that folks who, you know, voted a different way, they're wondering like, why are you all so upset and what have you? But it's because it's life or death,
Mhm.
you know? And because you haven't experienced these things, you don't understand, does not mean that it does not exist and that we're overreacting. So no, this is your feelings and what you're experiencing right now, Jen, is super valid.
I agree. I'm just hoping that as you're talking about not like sharing the joyful stories of the trans community, I'm just hoping that we can create spaces for that. And I agree. I think that the fear is valid. And I'm also too fearful for the entire community, but people of color, like immigrants, all the things. Um, but I think as marketers, we're gonna just have to get creative. As you're talking about, Desiree, like figuring out way to target them. Like we're just gonna have to like come to community and then figure out how we can fight the system. Continue like you're always fighting, but like even harder.
I feel like the next 4 years are going to be really critical to things like mutual aid for the community, right? Like we're going to
Yeah.
have to be able to figure out ways to come together and support us because I can't remember which one of you brought it up, but like just having federal funding pulled just for supporting trans healthcare is going to be an issue. So it's going to have to fall on us as it has on people from marginalized communities forever. It's going to come on us to protect each other because other people just don't care enough to do it. That's my unfortunate opinion, and I hate that I have it, but that's kind of where I've netted out at this point.
Well, I think that that opinion speaks to something I want to discuss also, which is around the business ramifications and the business realities, right? Like that opinion, I think, is something that I hold. And I think we've talked, I'm sure each of you have talked about this with other folks in your lives, and we've talked about this a little bit, but business is going to change. And I think the Dylan Mulvaney example is interesting because it it was incredibly frustrating. I think that she handled it like a pro in many ways. But it was truly the lack of being able to take a stance by the corporation that really was the problem on both sides. It didn't, I don't know who it was supposed to be speaking to, but they ended up kind of speaking to no one. But now, you know, we're at a place where queer marketing is disappearing. You know, we talk about representation and pride, for example, here at Do the Work. And I hold an annual sort of pride recap. And this year was bleak. It wasn't a fun conversation. We didn't have the people creating queer stories. And when we did, it was either very niche and very targeted, or it was very generic for the sake of safety. And so the business ramifications are going to be tremendous. And I think when we talk about a lot of the times queer marketing or marketing that's DEI focused, if you will, there's a lot of like, well, was there a gay person in that room? And now I'm like, well, there may be a gay person in that room, but does that gay person have enough power or strength or safety to speak up? And I wonder, like, how you all feel like from a business perspective. Ashley, I'm going to speak with you first because obviously this is very in your wheelhouse, but would love to hear from you about like not only the clear ramifications that we're going to have to endure, but what are the solves for the potential sort of like entire withdrawal, as Jenn was pointing towards?
I'm still trying to figure that out, right? Because those who have the privilege and the power and the money are the ones who, I don't want to say a lot, everybody, but I mean, we know that they voted for Trump. There's a lot of groups that voted for Trump. So those who have the power and the privilege to do that, or sorry, the power and the privilege and the money to back all these things, they're the ones who are writing our checks. Like they're the ones who are determining this. So I don't know the answer to that. I think that we're going to have to work in numbers. I think that right now everyone's kind of being really quiet and trying to regroup and like heal and like try to like brace themselves to what's to come. But I think we're going to just have to come together and like continue to push our clients, continue to push our leaders to say, no, this is beyond the right thing to do. Like, again, I keep saying, like, it's not black and white, it's green, like reminding them like the finances part of it, to help try to push it over the line for them to be like, yes, we should do this because you're leaving money on the table. And I'm not a person that's very like capitalism, everything, but in reality, this is what it is. And so we have to speak their language to be able to get what we need. And I think that's kind of where I'm going with that. And I hope that answered your question, but I just feel like I'm still trying to figure that out because learning every day with a new appointment of like his cabinet, every day with like something else coming out about Project 2025 or some other horrendous statement that's being made about the LGBTQ plus community. We're just trying to like, every day we're just trying to like collect ourselves to be like, all right, that's another blow. Let's try to figure it out. Let's try to pivot. And so I think that we're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and I guess I think along the lines of, within capitalism and those that have the privilege, it's, starting to vote with our money, and those organizations, those companies, those corporations that are about it and actually continue and stand up and say something, reward them with our dollars. And those that are absolutely against us, I know y'all love that hateful chicken, but quit eating it. Make this prominently known. And I guess in a world, I hope to see those social impact campaigns, Aria, that you were talking about, the ones that won so many Ken Lyons awards that agencies go after. That's what I'm kind of hoping happens, is that folks go back, they hunker down the heel, and then they come up with that right strategy, that right campaign that actually tells the right story for the folks that need to hear and to promote healing. But again, we don't know where people's heads are right now. And like, as Ashley said, like, we're all kind of just sitting quiet and seeing what's going to happen. But I do hope that that is what occurs in some form of fashion.
Yeah, before Jen, I let you jump in. I do think one of the things one of my old mentors really struck with me and something I think about all the time, and frankly, part of the reason why I left working in advertising at an agency was it's a client service business. You are serving a client, you are working for a client, and that makes this kind of work incredibly challenging. And I think one thing that, the double-edged sword of all of this, I guess, is that like, we have the moments where they're like, yes, let's make the campaign right now. Like 2020, we were making the campaigns. Like 2013, we were making campaigns about queer marriage. Like we were doing all these things. And then that also on the other side is like, well, not right now. We'll come back to this. We won't do this now. And I wonder, like, it's both the business ramifications, of course, but then also like the ramifications of the employees who work at these agencies who are like, okay, so we're not doing this thing for the community that I'm a part of or my best friend's community. Like we're not going to do any of that. And there's just there's a real difficulty there from business in terms of like people will not want to work at agencies anymore. Also, Jen, sorry, I had to just throw that in there, but want your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first of all, I believe as of 2018, 50% of all employees were still closeted at work. So it's not like we're already out, but we're going back into the closet, and that's terrifying, right? But Ashley, I think it was you who mentioned business case, and I talk about this a lot. I've done some research and found some studies that talk about this, and I think this is important. According to a 2019 study by Heat, brands with the most diversely represented ads saw an average stock gain of 44% in a 7-quarter period, and it also showed 83% higher consumer preference than ads that don't showcase diversity. Like, if that's not reason enough to showcase diversity, like, then you're not making decisions that are about being successful and earning money in a capitalistic world. Like, that's decisions based on internalized prejudices or external prejudices. Like, I mean, I don't know how I can be more plain about it than that. Like, the data is here to say being diverse is better business. So why aren't we doing it? And I think that as we start to see the retractions over the coming days, weeks, months, and years, we're going to be asking a lot of those questions.
So let me ask all of you, over the course of the next 4 years, maybe further, depending on just what kind of lives we're all going to live. What does health equity actually look like for queer people? What does that mean? Are those empty words now? Jen, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on the term, and is it possible right now?
So one of the main reasons I started getting into advocacy was because when I came out, my doctor refused to treat me. His answer was, I only prescribe hormones to women and you're not one. And from there, I had to fight with my insurance company to find another doctor who would treat me. And then I found that doctor, and they wouldn't treat me either, but they were willing to refer me to a third doctor. And it's just this idea of how remarkably discriminatory healthcare is for queer people. You know, we talked earlier about how there is this perception of how the community is overly sexualized. Like, people are afraid to go into doctors because they're afraid of the people they're going to deal with, right? One of the things that I think telehealth was so great about was that it allowed people to avoid having to go into an office, worry about discrimination, and just have to sit and look at their doctor through a screen. And even then, it's not perfect, but it's a start. I wish I had a better, more optimistic answer. Desiree, Ashley, I hope you do. Health equity isn't possible in today's system. We have trans healthcare banned in states. Like, whether or not I have access and continue to have access, there are still trans people in this country do not have access. And, you know, I don't want to be cliche, but I believe it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said, nobody's free until we're all free. And I cannot sit here and say that I have health equity when my siblings don't. And I think for that reason, I don't think health equity is even close to a possibility in today's world.
Ashley?
I'm still hopeful because I know me and Desiree both work in health equity, but on the other sides of the spectrum, right? But as you mentioned, Jen, it's true. Like, especially when trans folks go to the doctor, it's not just the doctor, it's the staff, right? It's those who are interacting with them. It's them not using the right pronoun. It's them, like, it's various things that happen that affect their access to care, and equitable care. I think that we can't be remiss when we're talking about health equity, talking about the intersectionality, right? So as we're talking about folks who are of color, who already are, have like poor health outcomes just due to their race and their zip code. We also have to talk about those who are immigrants, right? Like, there's a huge fear right now that's happening within the immigrant population who are also part of the LGBTQ plus community that are fearful that they may get deported even if they're naturalized citizens. Like, there are various factors in that. And so I think as we're talking about equity, some of those people in those communities are afraid to see a doctor, or afraid to be clocked and then later on get picked up by ICE or whoever. So, like, I think that we can't just talk about when we think about health equity, you have to think of all aspects of that. It's either just like health literacy, it's talking about making sure things are in multiple languages. I'm fearful that, as we have a huge community of Latinos and other groups, that they may not even have access to that information in Spanish anymore because they're fearful, like, because of this level of like anti-immigrant sentiment. So, like, I'm hopeful that people will still do the right thing, but I know how society works. And I know if that's the majority of people who do not care about making sure things are equitable, it may be a lot harder for those to get equitable access to care and be able for us to eliminate the barriers to that care, because we're just piling them on now at this point. And I think in 2025, it's going to be even worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like, because of the work that I do, and essentially, like, there was a conference I needed to give a presentation on, how do we keep the charge going on a health equity despite the DEI backlash? And I spent the better part of this year just like spiraling down because I saw it coming. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I saw it coming. So in a way, I've been mourning, especially all summer, and like really hit kind of a rock bottom in like September. And then in a way, that's why like I probably have like an oddly like, oh, it's gonna be okay, like disposition today. It's because I've been mourning all year. And so essentially it's like, okay, now I have the news. What am I going to do next? What are we going to do next? And as I think about health equity and what that looks like for us, it's giving Underground Railroad. It's giving, we are going to have to like, hey, there is this particular doctor at this clinic that is going to treat you as a human. go there and like flood those folks. It's going to be us, like that mutual aid of giving each other the tips of where the things are, where the people are, where it is safe, so that we aren't walking in to those essential bombs with the very discriminatory of care. But I see Jenn's hand raised.
Something that I was able to help do as a part of my day job, as we're talking about doctors that are going to treat us like humans. This isn't perfect, it's self-selective, but if you're on a place like Health Grades, you can actually filter by doctors who have raised their hand to say they are LGBTQ inclusive doctors. They're not everywhere, but it's a starting point. And if you're struggling to find a doctor who you think will treat you right, it's at least some place to go. Like, I will always give referrals. I've referred so many people to both my therapists and my doctors, but like, if you're in a place and you don't really know where to start, that might be a place to go.
That's fair.
I was really struck by that comment, Desiree. It's the thing that I think for me as a white passing gay cis man has always been like the worst fear of like, as you referenced it, as the Underground Railroad, and knowing that I'm very lucky enough to be one of the people who's going to be above ground, who's going to be like directing people and telling people, and I'll be the person who steps into a doctor's office, be like, is this a safe space or not? And I think I'm really taken aback because the last few weeks I've been having a lot of conversations with queer people, with women, with people of color, with allies, straight male allies, talking about what are we going to do? How are we going to do this time? 2016, we had the Women's March. There was anger. There was so much energy. I think this time there's a lot of anger still, but it's manifesting differently. At least for me and the people that I'm talking to, a lot less desire to march, a lot less desire to be visible outside. And obviously we're in the wake. I don't want to take away from the fact that this is we're still living in the same moon that this has happened in, you know, and I think that's important. But I also think it is, to me, slightly flag raising of like, okay, so we're all very down and hiding and not being out there in the world. What does that mean for us? What are the things that we can do? What are we going to do? And I don't suspect anyone here has the answers to that question. But I am wondering for you all how you are feeling about, you know, in your personal lives, in your lives as lived people who are living in this country. What are the things that you feel like you're doing this right now and you think other people can do right now? And also, what's your general thoughts around the kind of weird malaise that's happening for a lot of people in this moment? Ashley, can I come to you first? Or Desiree, please.
Desiree, do you have a thought? If you have a thought, go ahead, and I'll chime afterward.
I mean, right now we're in self-preservation mode. And we get our strength from each other and being in community with one another. You know, I do miss the world where, you know, we were just kind of like hanging out in our gay ghettos, our community spaces where, like, after just the worst week, we knew where we can go to be with our people and be ourselves and behind these closed walls. And we lost a touch of that with this newfound, like, oh, I can be myself out in the world, where we lost a sense of that community in a way. So I'm seeing, and I'm, you know, looking to like, okay, let's get back to us so that we can, you know, heal and get back to it. But I think right now it's hard to look to like, you know, what are we going to do to solve? It's more of a, you know, what can we do to recharge our own batteries in order to do what is next? And that's going to be within community and, you know, creating art, what have you, just any distraction away from the news at this point. But that's kind of where I'm starting.
I think I can say, as from a Black woman perspective, I'm like a Black cisgender woman who's an ally. I think that we as Black women are constantly fighting the good fight for everyone. Like, even if you look at the vote, right? Like we're like 80 something percent voting for Kamala. And I think we're tired. And I can say that as a person who is constantly like protesting for everything, like not even a performative way. Like I haven't had Starbucks since October. Like that's the type of energy like of last year. Like I'm that person who's constantly like doing all the things, donating the money, like making sure I'm reading up on stuff and whatever else. And I think that those who have been fighting for a very long time, we need to make sure we continue to fill our cup and give from the overflow so we can continue to be strong for not only ourselves, but for others. And I think that is that's like the feeling now of like regrouping, seeing what that looks like, renaming, reframing, but also like taking care of me and those who I love and the communities that I love, including the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like, and like seeing what my neighbors need, because I think that's one of those things where people forget, like, just because your name is not on the list today doesn't mean it won't be on there tomorrow. So we kind of have to continue to look out for each other, especially those from the most marginalized communities. And so right now, I think my mode is that I am in like research mode. I'm like going hard. Like I've literally read Project 2025, 920 pages, like reading it, knowing all the things, trying to figure it out, learning about the cabinet, learning about like, for example, tomorrow they were going to have that bill for I think it's HR 9495, where they're going to go after the nonprofit organizations to try to strip their power or strip their 501c3 status so they can no longer like donate, collect money and like fight the good fight. We need to be on top of that. So I'm hoping that those who feel like their cup is pretty full, they can continue to help like call the senators and like get people organized and inform people and get on social media and let people know, because I think that this is a marathon, not a race, but it's also they're chipping away. Like I think they're doing the most audacious things at the beginning, so we get exhausted. So then the other things slip through. And we need to continue to look at the little things, because these things are going to start adding up. Because again, if the nonprofits no longer have, or if people to speak up for the most marginalized, including trans community and LGBTQ plus and whoever else, immigrants, whatever, then we can't expect them to fight for us and have that community that we're looking for when we're in need, because they will no longer exist. And so we have to continue to like help those around us. And I feel like that's very long-winded, but that's kind of where I am right now.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Jenn?
I've put a whole lot of thought into this as somebody who's done a lot of speaking, but somebody also has kind of backed away from speaking because the news and the constant onslaught of anti-trans information and everything that's happening in the world today has just taken such a toll on my mental health. And I think this panel has helped me realize that I'm through the grieving stage and I'm to the anger stage of all of this. But something that I've actually done is because of some conversations I've had in the past. Students today are afraid to graduate college because they feel like they have to go back into the closet. That was before 2 weeks ago. They don't have examples of people like us outside of celebrity or outside of athlete to showcase that a world of positive living can exist for queer people, for trans people. And so what I have started to do is offer myself as a visible trans woman in a time when being visible is scary, to come to schools and speak. I reached out to my alma mater last week and offered to come speak at no cost, to be a mentor to queer or trans students, to be there and be visible. And I'm offering this to schools that are interested. I do say specifically, if you can afford to pay speakers, please, Goddess, bring in a Black trans woman specifically, because they need the money. But so many schools are going to be afraid to pay anybody to do this. And it is important that we stand up and we let kids know that there is a future. It is possible. And I think for me, that's kind of where my advocacy is going to lean over the coming 4 years. I mentioned earlier that mutual aid is going to be such a big part of it, making sure that we're creating communities and safe space. But I think for me, one of the things that I want to try to do is leverage my privilege to be visible at a time where it's going to be scariest to be visible.
Friends, I cannot thank you enough for taking this time to talk with me and to talk with each other and to just have this vulnerable, very honest conversation. This is the kind of work that is quite exhausting. And so I just like want to thank you all for your energy and showing up today and having this conversation with me. It just is so important. And I think it is the type of conversation that everyone should be listening to, and everyone should be hearing from folks like yourselves around this. And so I'm just so thankful to be able to share this virtual space with you. Very like humble to just be one of the 4 boxes here. And so I want to allow, before we go, for each of you to just tell folks where they can get into contact with you. Also, if you feel like there's an organization you want to point folks to, whatever that might be. Desirée, I want to come to you first. Can you tell folks how to get into contact with you and anything else you want to tell them before we go?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Desirée Duncan. Yeah, and I can't think of any orgs right now, but Jenn, look what you're doing as far as going to schools. If there is an LGBTQ plus center in your area, offer yourself up to be that visible person, especially for those youth groups. And then I would encourage, the way that we always showed up for our brothers during AIDS, those of you that have the privilege, show up for us now.
Thank you, friend. Jenn, I'm going to come to you next. How can folks get into contact with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just linkedin.com/in/Renoe, R-E-N-O-E. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. It's JENNINRINTH, RINTH, which is short for labyrinth because I was lost. My Finsta became my Insta, so to speak. And feel free to reach out if you want to have a conversation. From an organization standpoint, Lambda Legal, we're going to need all the legal support that we can get over the coming days, weeks, months, and years to fight what's happening, to fight the legislation that's being passed, specifically all the way up to the Supreme Court. In a lot of places, I'm more than willing to guess. So if you have money to give, if you're not giving directly to your local centers to make sure that we're keeping homeless trans youth, especially those of color, off the streets, then at least consider helping us fight to create a better and more equitable world for all of us.
Thank you, Jenn. Ashley, where can folks get into contact with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My period got created was my spelling. So it's Ashley with an I. It's spelled ASHLEI and Rogers with a D. I just want to kind of double down on what the girl said, that find the centers, find the nonprofit organizations, get educated in what's happening. I think this is not the time for us to have our head in the sand. Ignorance is not bliss at this period. We need to continue to be up to date on what's happening. Take breaks when needed, though. Take care of yourself. But we need to stay in the know. I also think that if you're able to donate to these nonprofit organizations, I think funding will be a big issue. Some of their federal funding may be going away, depending on who they're serving. So put your time and effort and money where it serves the community the most. And as an ally, just continue to speak up in spaces where not everyone will have the privilege to sit at that table. So we got to just keep fighting.
Thank you, friends. I think if anyone's listening and is here and works in marketing and advertising and you don't know where to put your energy, you can come to do the work. We would love your energy. You can reach out to me. My email is my full name @gmail. You can find Do the Work on all the social media. You can find me anywhere. You can find our co-founders, Graham Nolan, Kate Wolf. Please reach out to us. If you want to help, if you need help, whatever it might be, we are here for you in every capacity as it pertains to being a queer person in marketing and advertising. And also, if you need a friend, I'll be your friend. And so I want to thank these folks for joining us. This has been a really insightful conversation, and I'm so thankful yet again. Please come back. I want to keep talking with all of you. I'm so thankful for your insight, and I feel like I've learned a lot. And so, folks, we will see you again soon. I hope the rest of your week is great. And thank you again. Can't thank you enough.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
All right.
Talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.